Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Stephanie McReynolds, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Alation. And we're going to go ahead and get started today. I know there's a few more people coming onto the line. But today we're talking about whether you're ready for a machine learning data catalog, and we have a special guest, Michele Goetz from Forrester, with us today. So while people are getting onto the line, I usually like to start with a little bit of humor in the morning if you're on the West Coast. I know folks dialing in worldwide, maybe in the afternoon. Instead of sharing the traditional cartoon, which has kind of been my signature with webinars, today I wanted to open a broad-based question. And it might seem like a little bit of an unusual question, but folks who have been following the Alation team on Twitter, or who attended Strata New York last week may not find this question that surprising. And the question of the day is, how is 80s rock and roll like data governance? If you have a proposal, feel free to test out the question tab on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar screen and enter a response. But I'll give everyone just a minute or so to come up with a creative answer before I reveal what I had intended and had in mind with the answer to that particular question. It looks like in the meantime, most of the attendees are getting on the line just fine. If you do have any issues that are technical in nature, we do have an Alation employee standing by if you can't hear the audio or having a hard time tracking with the video. Please use the chat window to send a message to the organizer, and we'll get you sorted out very quickly. So how is 80s rock and roll like data governance? Anyone who's seen our show tour shirts for the fall trade show season will note that we are celebrating in AC/DC style. We're back in black shirts, and we're talking about, instead of AC/DC, machine learning data catalogs, but it makes for a really nice hashtag. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see our physical events that we'll be attending this fall. We're hoping to see many of you there. These are our AC/DC style World Tour t-shirts that were actually inspired by Michele Goetz and the Forrester team with the report, the inaugural wave that they've written on machine learning data catalogs. If for some reason you haven't seen that report before joining the webinar today, there's a link here at the bottom of this page where you can go to the Alation website and get a complimentary copy of that report. We'll be talking today a little bit about that report as well as Michele's most recent research as we jump into the content and get started. But we're enjoying the celebration this fall with a little bit of rock and roll fun. So a couple of other housekeeping items for today's webinar. Feel free to tweet today if you find an insight of interest. We'll be monitoring the hashtag MLDC, and you can also tweet at Alation if you have questions or would like to make an observation as well. The agenda today will be about 60 minutes full of content. We would love to make this interactive. So if you have any questions to share with us, please do use the question window at the right-hand side of your screen to queue up your question. There are actually two windows. There's a question window and a chat window. I would prefer that you use the question window if you have a question in the middle of the webinar. We'll be queuing up the questions that way. If you have a technical issue or want to chat with another participant on the line, use the chat window for that instead. So not to make it more confusing than it needs to be, but that'll just help us keep organized through today's webinar. I also wanted to share with folks, I know sometimes in the past, webinar participants are expecting a demonstration of Alation to be front and center, but this is not that type of webinar today. We would like to use our time today to maximize learning from Michele Goetz about her perspective on the market. So if you would like a demo and that's what you showed up for, I would suggest that you go to alation.com and the Learn More page there and request a personalized demo. And we'd be happy to do that for you. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's not the content we'll be covering on today's webinar. And the last question I often get is, will there be a replay available if I have to drop off, or maybe I really like the content and I want to share it with some colleagues? Everyone will receive within 24 to 48 hours after the webinar a link by which you can replay the webinar, and you can share that link with colleagues so that they can get access to today's content as well. So I think that should be pretty comprehensive with housekeeping items. Again, if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us through the chat window. But we will move on and jump into today's content. As I mentioned at the top of the call, my name is Stephanie McReynolds, and I'm the head of marketing here at Alation. I am so pleased to have Michele Goetz on the line with us today. Michele is a principal analyst at Forrester. For many years, she has tracked the data and analytics space. I personally have known Michele for a number of years and appreciate her thoughtful perspective on the market and the transitions that have happened in data governance and data analytics over the last 10 years. She also has been a close an analyst close to the data cataloging space as it's evolved over the last 3 to 5 years. And she'll be headlining today's webinar. So, Michele, thank you so much for joining us today. So, Michele, if you're on the line, I want to make sure that we can.
There we go.
There you go.
I was muted. We don't need to hear heavy breathing during your intro. So. But thank you for such a warm welcome. I really appreciate it. And it's true. I mean, definitely have been working with Alation from the very beginning, and really excited to present today. Stephanie, I just wanted to let you know it's saying show my screen instead of just passing me the keyboard to move the presentation around.
All right, let me get that set up.
Yeah.
Let's see if that did it, Michele.
Okay, and then is that sliding? Oh, there we go. All right. So let's maybe begin a little bit. You know, usually when I start these presentations, I like to tell a little bit of the story. And one of the things I've always brought up is, you know, what is it about data? I mean, we love our data. We know it powers our business. We talk about it as an asset, and people go to amazing lengths to, you know, to get their data. I mean, I've told the story in the past of weather scientists working on top of Mount Washington during the winter, and, oops, it popped out. Well, I'll let you fix that for the time being. Working on the top of Mount Washington in New Hampshire for during the winter time, and during the winter time, the ice that gathers just naturally on the instrumentation can be up to 4 inches thick. And these poor souls that aren't getting paid to monitor the data and the instrumentation, they collect it out of the goodness of their hearts because it lends to their studies about what's happening with our weather and our climate, go up there on an hourly basis in -50-degree weather with access to hack off the instrumentation. Now, talk about going to great lengths and loving your data and, you know, putting the right effort to govern it, to ensure its completeness, to ensure the accuracy of it feeding into the analytics that they use for weather and climate analysis. Now, thank goodness, as enterprises, we don't have to do that, although sometimes it really does feel like that. And certainly when we look across all of the areas of our organization, it's been, you know, consistent that we are struggling with our data. It interferes with an understanding of our customer journeys. We're trying to create these rich digital experiences, and some of you might even be attempting to push forward on things like augmented intelligence and artificial intelligence, and that's another area that it's really kind of pushing on. And then certainly within, you know, general CRM capabilities, just seeing who our customers are or who the partners that we have on a day-to-day basis and what's happening with them. creates a lot of challenges, and it can be quite frustrating. There we go. Oops, sorry. It moved forward. Yeah, no, sorry. I apologize. It's just flicking funny on my screen. But that being said, the way that we've always tackled this is we govern our data. So why do I say data governance boo? And it's not just because we're almost in October and Halloween is coming along. Say the word data governance in most organizations and people are tired of it, they're frightened of it, and they are, fleeing from it. I talked to one enterprise architect at a insurance company. He's like, I won't even mention the word if I want my business stakeholders to be involved, because they've been through these projects before. We try to get these programs running, and there's always a command and control center. There's always too much time being taken out of their regular jobs, and they just don't want to do it anymore. So what is another way to get them engaged and get the information that is necessary? So how do we address the data problem? Also address the fact that you need data governance best practices to actually overcome this. Now, we've always said in the past, the business owns the data. The business is the stakeholder here, and they're responsible for ensuring that their data is good. And IT is there to support and enable that. Interestingly enough, I think there's a pendulum swing starting to happen here around the fact that we've had this, fatigue and fear and flight over trying to attempt to manage and govern our data. So in 2015, most data professionals, whether they were on the IT side or whether they were on the business side, felt that strategy, governance, and master data management areas, as well as a multitude of other areas, IT owned that. And I remember getting up on stage in 2015 and talking about this and saying, we need to do better. We need to get the business more engaged. And I bought into the myth too. But the reality is that we get to 2018, and rather than making inroads, as we've talked about, it's actually moving more and more towards the IT organization to try to fix and enable data governance more richly. Because it's really hard to scale in the environments that we have today. We're not just working towards the data warehouse or a CRM system or our ERP system. We're working across a very diverse federated ecosystem that is both on-prem, in the cloud, and integrated with our partners. So we don't even own some of the systems or the sources of where data is coming from, so that we can just move forward. And what does the business want? What have they always wanted? They just want data to work. That's it. It should be that simple. That's the goal. Data should just work. And the reality of this is that we are so used to a lot of the consumerization of technology in our day-to-day lives. Our smartphones are so simple. We go in there and we start working with data and getting insights and running our lives in a way that, we don't think about it anymore. We don't recognize all the things that are going on behind the scenes to have the right information at our fingertips, whether it's to ask a question or whether it's to be sort of, poked and prodded to do the right things or go to the right appointments, get to the right places in our job. And essentially what's going on here with data today that is very different in the past in the way that we use it is that we are shaping our data around very specific experiences. And if you look at the example here for Uber, you can use data to start to visualize and simulate what the business looks like, and even model that around different hypotheses and test different options in the way that you deliver experiences, the way you engage with customers, or even some of the more back office activities when it comes to supply chain, manufacturing, logistics, and or even helping to support regulatory compliance. So essentially what we want to be thinking about as we approach our data and overcome a lot of these challenges is not just working at the bits and bytes of it, but really thinking about data as the digital twin of our business, representing exactly what our business should be looking like and providing us a foundation to come forward. So what do we call this? How should we think about it? What is this new strategy to put into place? And Forrester and myself are talking about this in terms of being ambient. When we talk about data just working, when data is just a function of what do we do on our everyday lives, when we don't have to think about the technology, we can just execute. Data is running in an ambient nature. Digital is Ambient, and the governance has to support that. So really what we're doing here is shaping our data governance programs in a way that we shape all of our digital experiences. We're just applying that to solve our data challenges. So let's dive into this a little bit further. What do we mean when we talk about ambient data governance? First and foremost, you can't get there without intelligence within. And that's where being powered by machine learning makes all the difference in not only your ability to take care of the block and tackle work for your data governance activities, but to scale that in our highly federated and sophisticated ecosystems that we look at today. So it's aware, it's embedded, it's contextual, it's adaptive, it anticipates, and it is personalized to data interaction, use cases, and policies. And in this perspective, it's the data that comes out, and the technology kind of comes to the background where we're interacting with it and we know it's there, but it's not front and center. It's not driving our lives. Our ability to execute on our business activities is really what comes through. The intelligence is helping not only to manage what's going on in the underlying physical and logical layers of our data systems, but it's also ensuring that data is inferenced and enhanced to meet the contextual perspectives that we have for our data. How does raw data start being formulated into the data sets that feed the analytic models? How does it move into various views and facets when it's drawn into different screens within our application environments and devices? So thinking very succinctly about bringing the systems world of our data together with the contextual and business activities that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And to the point of technology fading to the bathroom, this also needs to feel natural and seamless. It's intuitive. Think about when when little kids or even your pets are, shown an iPad and there's applications on there. They naturally touch the screen. They naturally know how to do, move items on there. They know how to navigate through this, technology, this device. It's natural. It's intuitive. That's what seamless engagement is. Now, the machine learning underneath is ensuring that any of the data policies and controls that have already been put into place or that you need to scale out are intelligently connected to those actions. So they don't just live there in the repository. They're executable. They're dynamic based off of how you interact with the data, and they're responsive to different types of use cases and become more and more intelligent, as new use cases come about because they understand, how and are adaptive and can start anticipating other types of use cases for that data. And obviously that brings scale, and that, you want to ensure that these environments are trusted. So underneath you want to consider the security, the privacy, the permissions and preferences that go in here. So what you see really is as we talk about ambient data governance and the capabilities that you're applying to your data, it's not just to shape it and manage that data so at rest or in a cached scenario, it looks the way that you would expect it to look, but it's helping to scale and adapt that data for any type of use case, whether that's within an analytic, real-time, or streamed type of environment and engagement, and whether that's in an application or whether that's in an automated process. From a systems perspective, what you're going to see is an evolution of how we approach this. Back in the day, we used to manage all of our catalogs, our data dictionaries. How many of you were exporting data dictionaries from, your Oracle environments and driving them into spreadsheets and managing them that way? In fact, some of you today might still be trying to drive your classifications and your tagging and your policies through spreadsheets first before you start instrumenting them into areas like catalogs and glossaries and other types of data governance tools. Now, certainly coming along in 2010, you had the platforms for transformations were occurring with the data flows of ETL. So governance was happening in there. You're scripting it down. You're driving towards automation. It was interactive in the manner that you were putting technology and automated processes to your data. step forward into 2015 and in the years of big data, we are starting to have environments that are taking into account a slim version of applications where you're making the user interfaces more friendly. You're allowing stewards to interact with the same environments that your data engineers are, and there are different ways to communicate and to collaborate between the upstream requirements that come from your data governance teams and ensure that those are back incorporated and developed into the processes and management capabilities that your data developers are doing. Moving into the future, as we start adapting more and more machine learning into our environments, and as you know, today we're going to talk about catalogs, we're really looking at how data processes, intelligence, the data, and the interaction itself all comes together into a world that has simulated the environment of what good data governance looks like, not just in a program and data management practice, but also scaling those stewardship activities at scale to those that are sitting in the endpoints, so they are participating in stewardship capabilities or stewardship activities, but they're just doing it as part of interacting with the data, as part of their processes, as part of their business activities, and as part of their communications. So it's natural, it's not intrusive, and it's not disruptive. It's ambient within their environment. Now, where do machine learning data catalogs help you here? They are ultimately the first step. MLDCs are the foundation because what's happening in this environment is that the relationship between machine learning and the ability to capture and manage the semantic, logical, and physical metadata and models together create an opportunity where you are starting to be able to model and pattern the way that data is understood and how data is understood within the context of your business, within your data governance policies, as well as other potential use cases that you have for your data. Now, what makes it particularly strong is the fact that it's not just connected to your ETL, your data virtualization, your data warehouse, or your applications. It's not managing data in its persistent nature. It is taking in information about the data and adapting data governance and policies and making suggestions about how to classify and use and syndicate that information, because it's starting to understand and interpret what is happening and the utilization around processes in ETL, around data virtualization processes, around the way data consumers may be searching for data, really doing an understanding and an introspection of those searches, of those keywords, and what data is being consumed, used, and how it is used. It's taking in information through the development, governance, and analytic capabilities where collaboration around data is happening to prepare data for analytics and insights, prepare pipelines that are going to feed it into new services and APIs upstream into different digital capabilities, or as new policies are being developed, on an ongoing basis based off of the changing nature of the data. And then it is also nascently watching the data and how data drifts to start to alert and notify data stakeholders that actions need to be taken. Now, that's all at the core, but that suggestive quality also gets pushed out into the areas where people are interacting with your data, even if it's an insurance adjuster that is out in the field and has their tablet in front of them and is taking notes and making suggestions there. So really what you can see is that you are building an insight engine behind the scenes of all of your capabilities. And without a machine learning data catalog to be there as that insight engine, it is going to be very difficult to use that and to gather that intelligence and syndicate that out to create those ambient data governance experiences as you move forward. So really where you go next is, what is the experience? How does it change? You're going to go, let's tackle that fatigue issue. Why was everyone fatigued? It's never fun to be a data entry person and populating a governance business glossary with definitions, policies, standards, business logic, classifications, and tags. I mean, that's not what any of us dreamed we were going to school for. So what can you do today? Machine learning data catalogs, because of that intelligence, is able to now profile and do the in-depth introspection and get and see time to value in less than 8 weeks in certain circumstances. It doesn't just introspect the data in a particular source, it compares sources, it's looking at that introspection within the processes that you have today, and it's continuously collecting around new processes if you're also linking your machine learning data catalogs to some of the population of data lakes and analytic platforms and data science workbenches as data is being prepared. So you can see where you're able to not only quickly gain value as you establish data lake strategies and information fabric strategies, but also as you start to iterate, new analytic marts that move forward. How do we tackle the fear? Data governance, particularly in highly regulated industries, is always associated with risk and penalties. Nobody wants to lose their job because of a GDPR issue. Nobody wants to lose their job because of the way the capital is being managed and failing a Basel II, or how are you complying with BCBS 239. So it was always a command and control and a little bit of a stress factor. But today, what we can do with machine learning data catalogs is take care of those block and tackle defensive activities around governance much faster. Command those much faster so that we can get into the business of democratizing data, speeding up insight, because you're building on that time, that faster time to value, and you're building on the fact that just through interaction of data, you're able to more quickly scale around consistency, correctness, completeness, and, validate the data as you interact with it. And then lastly, you're not fleeing from the data anymore. You don't need to request as many data governance and business, data steward resources. You're not asking them to do a job that's not natural to what they do on a day-to-day basis. You're not asking them to learn about the IT things for data so that they can actually execute on their capabilities or execute their tribal knowledge onto the data. The environment itself, the fact that there now becomes a relationship between the intelligent agent within the machine learning data catalog and those who do have stewardship responsibilities, or stewardship responsibilities are just embedded within the way that we interact with data. That intelligence takes data to the point where data just works. So from that point, it's also building up for the architecture of the future. What you notice, and what I touched upon earlier when you looked at the original architecture, is machine learning data catalogs are a system of insight. They are an insight platform. So the question today, as you start thinking about the capabilities that you have running within your environment, it starts to allow you to kind of rethink that architecture today. The traditional data governance and processing you've done in the past, start collapsing that, rationalizing it, simplifying it, moving it into a more intelligent environment. So at the end of the day, what you start to see is, because you can scale out the way that you manage metadata and master data together, doing that intelligently, keeping that adaptive and insightful, through interaction, that starts actually creating something that really does look like a lot of the intelligent data platforms that are starting to come to market today for very purposeful environments. Think about the customer data platforms, the customer data intelligence platforms that are out there, or the solution purpose-built environments that are supporting some of your supply chain, your manufacturing and logistics types of capabilities that are out there. They're not your broader data lake, but they are those ponds that exist to be more purposeful towards the types of activities that you do. So really start considering that as you make this investment in machine learning data catalogs, what is it helping to do to place you in a better position to continuously modernize and optimize your architecture as you're thinking more about a containerized or serverless environment that is going to run your data. And from that perspective, we have our Forrester wave out there that really took a look at the top machine learning data catalog environments out there. And really what made our strong performers stand out is putting the pieces into place that create the first steps to help you think about how to create that ambient data governance strategy and experience. And so this is where machine learning isn't just there to understand and profile information, but it's being more predictive, prescriptive, and adaptive to different use cases and the data drift that exists within your environment. So some final thoughts for you, how to bring this all together. Number one, as we said before, really take a look at how do you use data to create a digital twin of the business. And in doing so, that gives you a much better understanding about how data governance and business activities work together, and you can start to manage and simulate what an ambient data governance strategy is going to look like for your business. It's providing a foundation to scale out your ability to collect and manage around that tribal knowledge and expertise into a centralized workbench. So in this manner, you're having a core set of intelligence, and that core intelligent engine is able to give you that ambient quality and capability today. You want to make sure that the approach and the service for data and governance where the interaction happens. Don't just stop at where data lives in data sources or a system of record. Don't just stop in the data processes, flows, and pipelines that you're developing. Really understand and interpret the interactions and activities that happen with data right up to the edge in the business applications, in the online environments, and in the digital ecosystems where automation and devices are being used. And use an understanding of those business activities and data interaction and see them through the lens of general stewardship capabilities to, remediate and improve that data over time. And then lastly, really take a look at the machine learning data catalogs that are out there and architected for the modern architectures that help you create the synergies between the data, the analytics, the applications, and the automation that you're deploying out in your business to create that digital business. So hopefully I gave you something to think about. It's certainly a bit more of a vision at this point, but certainly with machine learning data catalogs being in the market, it is something that you can take advantage of and put the first steps in. And hopefully I've also given you some things to think about from a data governance perspective and get over some of the challenges of your business stakeholders, both frightened and fleeing and fatigued from the existing data governance capabilities and programs that they've done today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele, for walking us through that perspective. There are a couple of different resources I know that you've made available to folks, including the WAVE, but also a more recent piece called Reclaiming Your Semantic Desert to Monetize Your Data. So I wanted to make sure the audience has reference to those items if you're interested in additional perspective by Michele on what's happening in the market and how data catalogs are supporting this vision for systems of insights and ambient data governance into the future. There were a few questions that came in. I think we'll just pause to take one or two of those. And if you have additional questions, we'll be queuing them up to the end of the presentation today. So please keep the questions coming. One question that came in, Michele, is specifically on machine learning data catalogs. Do they provide any support in terms of building business glossaries, or does that still remain a business-driven manual step?
Well, that's what the beauty is of this, is that not only are the catalogs supporting a lot of the metadata management expectations that you have from a data management perspective, but glossaries are included in there. That's where you can start incorporating both manually, things that you already have, uploading existing glossary artifacts that might be available, so that can get you going. But the difference here is that when the profiling or the the analytics is run on the data. As soon as you connect to a source or a process, to the catalog, it goes through an immediate evaluation of that information, and it automatically runs its own classifications and labeling and alignment of what would be potentially in existing data business glossaries today, and then moves you up into a stewardship function to make sure that what works and what doesn't work. How do you want to change it? So the difference is that you don't just have to sit there for weeks and months on end to try to manually populate it. The reason why you're getting so close to a lot of the business requirements for data governance is that the glossary components are automatically included there.
Thank you, Michelle. I have one more question that's a good transition question into my section. I'm going to share some examples of how customers in the market are adopting data catalogs throughout their organization. But I'd love to get your perspective on the first part of this question, which is, what is the adoption audience and adoption rate of data catalogs? Are non-IT people actually using data catalogs? Are lots of people using data catalogs frequently when they're fully deployed? So Michelle, since you have a much broader view of the market, it'd be great to hear what you're seeing in terms of broad-based adoption, and then I'll share a couple of case studies of customers that happen to be Alation clients where we can share some more details about usage.
Yeah. So the adoption is really kind of interesting. There's two areas that I see it coming out most. There's the sort of tactical needs that are happening. So as things like GDPR are coming up, or efforts to support any other types of governance activities, whether regulatory associated or whether they're related to MDM or quality or other types of activities, then there's a drive towards the cataloging tools to help support those types of initiatives. Those tend to be a little bit smaller and focused, but what we're also seeing on the other side is that the catalogs are considered a strategic component of an overall data lake strategy. And in our 2018 Business Technographics survey for data and analytics, the investment in machine learning data catalogs was a top 3 investment for big data and analytics. And that is unusual because before it very even rarely rose to the top at all. And to be perfectly honest, the conversations that I'm having with my clients they're not just focused on, I want to buy a machine learning data catalog and let me understand the how the different vendors rate and rank against each other, but I've been having much more in-depth conversations about understanding how the newer capabilities, particularly the machine learning, is helping to support the strategies for the modern data platform. And so those are, those two data points are kind of interesting. So it's the traditional governance things that have been driving a lot of the cataloging and glossary activities, but now you see a real understanding that machine learning data catalogs are really sort of that nexus point to amp up and get the most value of where your overall modernization for data strategy is going.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Michelle. We're going to transition into some examples of companies that have selected a machine learning data catalog and have deployed that machine learning data catalog at scale, and give you a sense of, for the folks that are on the line, what do some of these implementations look like? And I think we're going to focus specifically on what are some of the business benefits that you can see in the early stages of getting machine learning data catalog going in your environment. I see a lot of organizations moving towards ambient data governance, but the path there is a long-term path, and often folks are starting a little bit smaller in proving out results and getting engagement of the analytics user community first before they attack that larger perspective. One of the very common comments that people make as they start to evaluate a data catalog is that the struggle they see in their businesses has to do with how self-service analytics users can actually use their data. So finding the right data set, understanding all the context around that data, and really being able to trust it to trust that an insight is accurate is a huge challenge that we hear from almost every company and almost every industry. To give you a sense of 3 clients that we've been working with very closely over the last couple of years and what their experience is, I'll walk through a couple slides and a couple of examples. So in financial services, Munich Reinsurance is one of those organizations that has a very large population of actuaries. Munich Reinsurance is the world's largest reinsurance company. Their products are used to reduce risk for their clients. And as you can imagine, for many, many years, they've been running very advanced analytics to support their business. The chief data officer at Munich Reinsurance got started back in 2015 with a very small group. He had about 10 employees. And their mission and their task was to think in a new way about their architecture and the tooling that they had as a financial services company. And the driver for that thinking was to think about how they could develop a platform and an approach that would drive new products that were data-oriented. That program has grown dramatically over the last couple of years, and it's led to Munich Reinsurance implementing a brand new data lake. About 18 months ago, they turned on their data lake for accessibility internally, and they initially had about 400 to 600 employees using the lake. Andreas Kohlmeier, who's the head of data engineering at Munich Reinsurance, was just speaking last week at Strata, New York, and said that data lake is now supporting over 2,000 users that are exploring their data. And the data catalog has become the face to that lake that helps those users find the right data and understand the nuances of that data in the lake so that they can begin to drive analytics that support new data products in their organization. Pfizer is another company in a very different sector, pharmaceuticals, who has been undergoing their own data and analytics transformation. They've been moving a lot of their analytics work to the cloud, but I think more interestingly, and the more interesting story with Pfizer is that they have really doubled down on data science and AI, and are using machine learning algorithms now to help them identify patients with rare diseases, identify individuals who may be appropriate for clinical trials, and actually identify individuals that might not know they have a rare form of a disease, and identify those for potential as potential candidates for investments in pharmaceutical products going forward in the future. To make this transformation as a company, they've invested in an analytics workbench that started with their data science team, but really supports analytic users that go beyond the skill set of a data science team. So their chief information officer feels very strongly that a data catalog should be used to democratize access to data and enable a much broader range of users to be able to have a role in the discovery experience. And the Alation data catalog has been central to that transformation of their business. And then, of course, we see a lot of companies, not just technology companies, but here I've selected eBay as an example. A lot of companies are using a data catalog as a way to help start to govern their self-service analytics. Many organizations have implemented a data visualization tool or a data science platform to give more access to data and analytics to their population, but have bumped up against the challenge of governing that broad-based access to data. And I think the most egregious example that Karu pointed out here in this quote is happening with Excel. When users are extracting data out of the database, putting it into Excel, modifying it, putting it into a PowerPoint and shipping it around, there's really no way to govern or to control or even to audit what's going on with that data. And so a data catalog as a single source of reference for eBay has become an important portion of their data governance strategy and their journey to help encourage self-service analytics, but to also give guardrails to usage of data. And so these are just 3 examples of very different companies with very different strategies on how they'd like to use analytics in their organization. But a data catalog in all 3 of these situations is not only changing their architecture and how they democratize access to analytics, but is also driving very transformational business results in each of these 3 cases. In the case of Munich Reinsurance, they've introduced a new product around cyber attacks to reinsure organizations that have manufacturing facilities that are completely driven by robotics, and to assume that and to ensure that cyber attackers, that they're protected against the threat of cyber attackers that might try to reprogram those robots during downtime or overnight. So this ability to use a data catalog to discover and build new algorithms that become data-driven products has been a significant impact that Alation has helped the Chief Data Officer and his team make within Munich Reinsurance. At Pfizer, I previewed this a little bit, and if you're interested in the details, there's that Wall Street Journal article walks through in pretty significant detail an example around how machine learning models that were developed using this the analytics workbench that both Alation is a part of and Tableau is a part of, and Data IQ, those 3 products have worked together to help the team develop machine learning models that now identify rare heart failures like transthreatened cardiomyopathy. And that's a disease that often goes undiagnosed because the symptoms are similar to other forms of heart failure. But with these machine learning algorithms that they were to be able to iterate on very quickly using the analytics workbench and as a part of a data catalog, they've been able to have some breakthrough findings there. And the 3rd example I mentioned about eBay, I think for the individual who asked the question earlier in the webinar, is our business users and non-technologists really using data catalogs. eBay is a fantastic example of that. You see on the left-hand side of this screen a screenshot of eBay's business glossary, which is embedded within the Alation product. Alation has a business glossary capability that uses machine learning to suggest changes in technical titles that are more business relevant, and then tie that business glossary directly into the physical instantiation of those metrics in your database or your data lake instance. And so eBay has leveraged Alation as a data catalog and those machine learning capabilities to support 1,000 employees that log into Alation on a weekly basis to access their data. And that usage is growing very rapidly. They expect it to be 3,000 weekly users by the end of the year. So this gives you a sense of how, as Michele described, a data catalog can be a good foundation for a future architecture, which is of interest to the technical teams within an organization, but also how the business audience can see real business outcome impact and a significant amount of usage by non-technical individuals. The key users at eBay are really their product managers who are monitoring A/B tests in order to optimize the design of the pages that they own within the eBay environment. And so that's the non-technical audience that is able to find, understand, and really trust their data in a more repeatable way, given their data cataloging environment. I think my advice to folks that are interested in driving the same type of business outcomes, in addition to evaluating data catalog technology to do that, is to be very specific about how you roll a data catalog out in your organization. The 3 customers that I mentioned, as well as many of the customers in our install base, have been successful because they have focused first and foremost on a data catalog as an initiative to increase analyst productivity. If you have read any of Michele's research, this is a quote from Nowtech that talks about her Nowtech report that talks about the challenge of maintaining context for analysts side by side with the data. And I think this is most relevant in achieving this first goal of how do you ensure that analysts can be more productive in the analytic environment that you're providing them. And a data catalog can bring real results by making it easier and automating the collection of context around a particular piece of data or a data set. What we've seen at customers like Market Share and Albertsons is that on average, analyst productivity is increasing between 20 and 50% is what I would say is an average. Albertsons was seeing a little bit of a higher productivity gain of a 67% faster evolution to an insight from an understanding of the data. But on average, we're seeing a 20 to 50% increase. And basically what that increase in productivity is allowing the analytics team to do is to reclaim time back for deeper insights. So rather than having a whole bunch of 30-minute calls with different subject matter experts to try to understand in depth what's in a data set, they're able to use a data catalog like Alation to find that information cataloged already for them in a single source of reference, and then move very quickly into discovery and iteration mode and actually running queries against that data. And that reclaimed time to identify and iterate a bit more gets you to greater business outcomes faster. Once you've established that foundation of engaging the analyst and that having the analyst feel like they understand the productivity improvement from engaging with a data catalog as an assistant to their job, they're really interested in helping the data governance teams start to activate that data more. And so my second piece of advice for organizations that are looking at the next stage of adoption is to make sure when you're selecting a data catalog that you're selecting a data catalog that supports data curation with frameworks that focus on how to activate the information that is in the catalog. What do I mean specifically? There are data catalogs that just offer a more static repository of data, and that's not going to be super helpful. What you need is a catalog that actually takes that manual static inventory of data and adds to it a curated understanding of how that data is being used in the organization. Alation does this through algorithms that we call behavior I/O. Those algorithms look and parse the actual query logic that's being used across an organization to give recommendations back to analysts on what are the appropriate filters and joins and methods to use when analyzing data. And that enrichment makes this data activated. It makes it a living document of what's going on in the organization. Other ways to activate data in a data catalog are by selecting a data catalog that has really robust search capabilities. One of the first interactions a lot of analysts will have with a data catalog is searching for a data asset they might want to reuse. And the better the system is at interpreting the physical assets and relating that to business semantics, the more useful that search interface is going to be. Actually, selecting a data catalog that actually incorporates a query writing tool in it is also another way to ensure you can get activation of your data. Alation offers something called Smart Suggest as well as Trust Check to make recommendations directly within the workflow of analysts. One other important group of users that you often see involved in curation is a data stewardship team, whether the data stewards are giving 20% of their time and they're full-time analysts, but carving off some time to be stewards, or whether that's a formal role in the organization. It's important to look for a data catalog that supports a workspace for those stewards to be able to collaborate with the machine learning algorithms and tune those machine learning algorithms so that there's always a human in the loop of validating the machine learning algorithms that are activating the data. And the last feature that I'd recommend looking for that most of the organizations we work with find is kind of the unsung hero feature of a data catalog is a catalog that supports a rich collaboration environment. So that crowdsourcing is encouraged as part of the curation activity so that folks can make comments and engage with other analysts that may be more knowledgeable about the data. And then all of those interactions are actually available as part of the knowledge base that that data catalog provides to the rest of the organization. So I've gone through those 5 features pretty quickly. There's some additional content on our website on the resources page that walk through what to look for in a data catalog if you're interested in spending a little bit more time with those recommendations. But the last thing I wanted to cover before we wrap up on the content today is just this notion of when you are ready to start governing and thinking about how a data catalog can be part of your data governance strategy, I think that the most interesting opportunity that data catalogs provide, because they've been designed to help activate your data in addition to supporting a single source of reference, is this notion of a data catalog being used to change behaviors of your analysts grassroots up rather than top-down governance. And what we've seen in organizations that have gotten to that stage of adoption is that they're seeing a significant increase in the accuracy of the analysis that's being done in their organization. One of the things that we've done within the Alation product to help support that movement towards behavioral change and more grassroots orientation rather than top-down enforcement of data governance is to incorporate what we call a feature that we call Trust Check directly within the query writing interface of an analyst. So this is a screenshot of Compose, which is a SQL query writing tool, shipped with Alation as part of the data catalog. And you see in the center of the screen a red, yellow, or green highlight of certain components of this SQL statement. What we're hovering on in this screenshot right now is the red component. This is a warning. This is telling the analyst who selected this table name as part of their SQL query that they shouldn't be using this field because it's been deprecated by the data governance team. And this indicator actually pops up as they're typing their SQL query so that there's real-time feedback about the data governance rules as the analyst is doing their work. This is not a scenario where the governance rules have to be memorized and the analyst has to remember how to use it and you only catch defectors with an audit trail. This is a real-time activation of data governance within the workflow of an analyst, and it's made possible by having this data catalog that is driven with machine learning algorithms working underneath within your environment to produce this type of output. So those are 3 suggestions about what to think about as you consider starting a machine learning data catalog journey. Delivering analyst productivity first and outlining a project that's focused on how you can get analysts and end consumers of data heavily engaged in the data catalog. That's one of the best practices that eBay has brought to the market in their implementation. Next, thinking about how you really activate that data in the catalog by ensuring that the vendor you select has incorporated curation frameworks that help activate in their foundation. And then the third suggestion I have is rethinking data governance a little bit to think about how you can use this new platform as more a grassroots up implementation that really changes behaviors on how data is being used in the organization. So I know we have a number of questions and answers coming in. We may run a little bit over the top of the hour if folks can stay on to answer some of those. If you do need to drop off, I wanted to give you a couple of indicators for more information. If you're interested in details, I covered the customer stories I shared today at a pretty rapid pace. So if you're interested in more information, please do go to our customer page on alation.com and you'll find detailed examples of those customers with additional results outlined on our customers page. If you are interested in a personalized demo to learn more about features, I know that a number of the questions coming in were things like, what feature sets does Alation specifically support? There's some of that information in Michele's Wave, but we're also really happy to give you a personalized demo and walk you through our capabilities. So that's the second link on the right-hand side here. And then for folks who appreciated Michelle's perspective today, I did want to let everyone know that there is an event in early December, the very first Forrester Data Strategy and Insights event, and Michelle will be speaking both on data catalogs as well as ambient data governance for that event. And I would encourage everyone to register and attend if you're interested. Alation will also happen to have a booth there, and so we'll be showcasing the product and answering questions there as well. So I will pause there and pull up the questions and see if we can get through a couple of those for folks that can stay a little bit past the top of the hour. For anyone who joined late, because that's a couple of the questions, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar within 24 to 48 hours afterwards. So Michelle, there's a couple questions that have come in, which are on the methodology to establish the business case of data catalogs, how ROI is being calculated to drive adoption. If you're comfortable sharing a broader perspective outside of just Alation on that topic, it looks like there's probably about 4 or 5 questions that have come in on how do you get started in putting together your business case or your ROI.
Mm-hmm. So typically what I'm finding, going back to what I was explaining before in terms of sort of the 2 drivers of data catalog investments, when it's over on the regulatory side and anything having to do with some of the objectives coming from the data governance teams, there typically is some type of ROI calculation that goes along with it, because it's being directed very specifically towards different types of business activities or risk models that are being oriented towards. And so that's the way that, the ROI calculations kind of run out. So are you able to, reduce a certain amount of risk? Are you speeding up time to data pipelining or analytics, things of that nature? So very sort of efficiency-based metrics or risk-based metrics. The other side, when you're looking at the overall data strategies, what I find very interesting there is that it's less aligned to how do I define the specific ROI for how much I'm spending on the catalog, versus the cataloging capabilities are being positioned within the overall investment requirement for the building of a modern data platform, of extending into new areas. So it's really sort of being folded into the overall investment for the strategy itself. And in that case, the catalog is being aligned in terms of the business case towards where it is directly and indirectly supporting the objectives or the outcomes that various stakeholders for, say, that data lake environment are going to be supported. Oftentimes, the first place where the business case is associated is where they've prioritized the beginning points, like where a pilot is going to exist and how the catalog is helping to facilitate getting that pilot moving quickly, and how it is also supporting building the muscles up around managing data, governing data, and broadening out the data democracy, the collaboration, the communication, and the overall best practices around handling data both at the center as well as it's being managed at the edge. So again, you've got 2 different ways of going about it, but I would say if this investment is very specific to a problem statement, then you're usually looking at efficiency metrics or at risk metrics, linking back up to those, seeing where catalog is helping you to support those. And then on the other side, you're really drawing the cataloging capability into the overall data lake or analytic investment that you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. There were also a couple of follow-up questions. I think for me on the eBay use case, on the eBay slide, it mentioned Alation being used by data scientists who are our users at eBay. And there was a question of how they could benefit from a catalog. And then there was a secondary kind of related question, which was, Stephanie, are you really saying that users at eBay do not extract data and put it into Excel? How does Alation completely stop that practice? So I'll address both of those very quickly. Of course, Alation can't completely prohibit people from extracting data and putting it into Excel. But what eBay has found is that there is less motivation to take that path. So what a data catalog does very efficiently is it makes it easy for individuals in the organization to find data sets that have already been prepared or find BI reports that have already been prepared and reuse those data assets. So there's less of a need to ask someone to extract data for you because you can quickly, within seconds, find what you need that's already been prepared at some point in the organization. Something like 80% of the reports and dashboards that we're writing have already been written in the organization by someone else. It's just been hard to find it across all the diversity that we're seeing in BI and data visualization environments. So what eBay has found is that there are fewer requests to extract data and drop it into Excel. I'm sure it's still happening as it's hard to knock down spread marks in any organization, but it's that type of use case scenario is reduced significantly with the catalog just because it's so much easier to take other paths to find those data assets. And the story around data scientists and our users at eBay is very similar. Alation is used as a platform by those data scientists to publish their work out to a broader audience so that that code can be reused within the organization, and the data sets they use to feed into that code base or train some of those algorithms are easily findable and reused in the organization. So that's a lot of the value of the catalog is from this ability to search easily and find all the context around what's already been developed so you can reuse it for future projects. There's a lot of questions on how does Alation differ from other competitors. That gets very specific. I would point folks to Michele's research. The machine learning data catalog wave is a great starting point for that. And then maybe if you have more specific questions that we can address at Alation more specifically, I'd be happy to have you request that on the website, and then we could set up a meeting to walk through that in detail with you. I had one more here, Michele, that perhaps since you've run quite a few references for the wave, you may have a perspective on, but feel free to tell me that you don't. The question is there any data access speed impact with data catalogs when processing large terabyte data sets? So performance question. How did data catalogs...
So in some ways, data catalogs actually cut down on the performance, and the reason being that for certain types of analytic understanding, machine learning is not only understanding and interpreting what the data is, but it's also looking for the links or the relationships between the data. By doing those, by understanding and then looking at those associations, it's actually generating an insight. So in some cases, you don't have to go all the way into building new analytic models to get to facts. The catalog itself is actually a source that you can gravitate towards those facts. Now, from catalog to catalog, you're going to get different performance requirements. So really what you want to think about and test against is where, what types of workloads is the catalog going to support? If it's more in terms of real-time and streams, then you're going to want to ensure that the way that the catalog manages those services is service-oriented. It's driving towards APIs. It's, relevantly positioned towards working within real-time services and streams, and it was designed to do so. Other cataloging environments are really much more oriented towards the batch processing and the traditional data governance methods, even though there might be machine learning capabilities within there. So, really, what I would say is there are going to be different performance levels depending on the workloads, and that's something that you really want to make sure that you test within your environment, based off of what you want to get. It shouldn't impact it if it's designed to support those workloads, but certainly every type of workload and performance requirement can sometimes become unique. But that's the way I would look at it. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Michele. There's some more detailed questions coming in, but I'm going to encourage folks to get in contact with us directly on the specifics of what databases and Hadoop distributions and cloud distributions and BI tools Alation support. So we're happy to share that information with you, but I direct you to the website to get those answered. I think we've gone quite a bit over time, so we're gonna wrap up at this point. Thank you so much for everyone who stayed on for your time. And Michele, it's been a pleasure co-presenting with you and working with you as this market evolves. And I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone on the call ends up doing with their data cataloging strategy going forward.
Thank you.
So thanks very much for everyone attending. We hope to stay engaged with you and hear from you soon. Goodbye.